Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we're going to be looking at one of the OGs, one of the first mechs to actually walk the battlefield with the Hammerhands. It's not a super common machine, not nowadays at least, and even originally it wasn't the most common thing around. It was basically always in the armed forces of the Federated Sons, but it is one of those heavy mechs that defined the concept of heavy mech for all other mechs to follow. It is also probably one of the first modern battle mech. A bit weird to say, it doesn't have any real fancy equipment on it, but it was one of the first machines to not be using any of the primitive compounds and components that were used on previous machines like the Mackie or the Hammerhand's predecessor, the Battle Axe. So let's get into it. Davion quickly had access to battle mech technology after the Mackie Revolution. Unlike some of the other parties, they basically traded for the technology, or most of the technology. The Lyran stole it, the Combine decomposed it. Everybody had different ways of building their own Mackies, but Davion actually went and started making new machines to compensate and to support their Mackies, or their clones of Mackies, to say the least. The Swordsman is probably one of the first non-hegemony battle mech produced. Between that and the Commando, it really, you have to look at the paperwork and try to figure out which of the two prototypes came out of the factories first. But the Swordsman is one of the first medium mechs, the Kudo being the first one. And the Swordsman gave the engineers and the techs at Davion an idea of how to build battle mechs, how to make them work. Even though this one was lacking in just about anything, you really don't see swordsmen anyways nowadays, at least, let's say, not in normal ways. Next up was the Battle Axe, probably one of the premier heavy mechs of the era. The Axe is better known for being one of the predecessor to Star Corps Warhammer nowadays, but it's still a decent enough machine in its own right, especially for the era. The BKX-1X had a large laser in each arm, machine guns and LRMs in the torso, and a shoulder-mounted SRM-6. Kind of what you would expect for something in the family of the Warhammer. It was slow, it was poorly armored due to the fact that it used primitive armor alloy, but it gave people an understanding of what to do with heavy mechs, and it gave Davion an understanding of, well, what should we be using heavy mechs for, and how should we build them in the future? Star Corps are the ones who took most of those lessons to art a little bit more, but the Battle Axe was around for a little while and, came back later on, unlike the Swordsman. Next one is one that we probably don't need to talk about too much, which is the Varney 1R Wolverine. This one introduced jump jets into the mix, teaching the Federated Sons how to have their mechs jump over things and crash into things normally. Primitive jump jets were rather terrible, and the poor people at Davion used it more than some of the other factions of the time, having some of their pilots grow to dislike them. This is another mech on the list that is still around nowadays, but strangely enough, the Wolverine is now more associated with the Draconis Combine than Davion. Just a little bit of an odd fact. Finally, the Hammerhand is the final product in that line of early mechs, but the production model, the HMH3V, was actually fully modern. You had modern armor, a modern cockpit, and a modern engine assembly, and it was one of the first mech to actually do so. At the era where it came out, it probably had some of the best armor available, some of the most efficient electronics available, and the engine was cheaper than what you would normally have on a mech its size. It was quite successful at the time. It is bigger than the Battle Axe and the Warhammer. It's at 75 tons, but it is painfully slow with a top speed of 54 kilometers per hour. You get 3 jump jets to be able to bounce 90 meters, and those are the modern jump jets, so you shouldn't be crashing with them as much. For us, we'll look at it and say that there's nothing really modern on it, but it was really cutting edge at the time. You've got a standard chassis protected by 11.5 tons of standard plates, making it rather thin-skinned for a mech its size, but it was massive for a mech of its time, and it's more than the Warhammer now as for the standard production model that was around for the longest time. Other positives on the Hammerhands, well, all the actuators are reinforced to make sure infantry can't just chuck explosives into them, which was a pretty big problem at the time, and still is nowadays, at least to some degree. Your arms mount big 10-class autocannons with a coaxial medium laser, and the entire assembly is reinforced so you can actually use your arms as battering rams. Your shoulder mounts a classic 6-tube SRM fed by a ton of ammo, and the autocannons are fed by 4 tons of reload, which they share between them, which would allow you to use a variety of specialty ammo, but at the time, you would have had flechette and flak and the standard rounds. Nowadays, you've got precision, you've got armored piercing, which would be quite decent there. You get 13 heat sinks, which keep you moderately cool, and you've got a low heat curve in general because autocannons don't generate as much heat as, let's say, a large laser or a PPC. As we said earlier, the Davion pilots did not really like jump jets. It was understandable until you have the modern version like you add on the Hammerhands, but they still didn't like them very much. What they did in this case was try to keep the mech as fast as the Mackie, but give it more firepower instead of the jumping ability. You take out the shoulder-mounted SRM-6 and you replace that with a PPC by taking out the jump jets as well. You get a lot of direct fire on that particular upgrade model, but I'm not sure it's quite worth it in the end. And 40 years down the line, well, that's when the Warhammer came out. The Hammerhands was incredibly popular, and it was kept into production for a little bit after Warhammer came out, but StarCorp basically used the ideas they got from the Battle Axe and the Hammerhands to figure out what they needed to make as far as a heavy mech goes, and the Warhammer basically replaced the other two AFFS machines in most situations. While the Battle Axe stuck around, at least for a while, it stopped production, and people just kept buying Warhammers, which was produced in just about every country in massive amounts. And most facilities building Hammerhands were actually refurbished to build Warhammers later on. The people at Eckernar basically sat on the design from that point on until people really needed new mechs during the Jihad. Ramping up production was the HMH-5D, which our friends at Eckernar also sold the rights to the people at Essen Industrial Works to build. In order to improve mobility, you replace the standard jump jets with improved jump jets, while the cooling system is replaced with 10 double heat sinks, which still gives you better cooling than the original 13. The plating is reworked with ferrofibrous alloy, giving you an improved protection, and the medium lasers are upgraded to extended range versions, which the heat sink system will be able to compensate for very well. Your targeting array is also tied to a C3 slave unit, allowing you to share telemetry with other units if possible. This is not a terrible upgrade. I'm not a huge fan of improved jump jets, you know me, but still, it's not entirely bad. There's very few things you could rework on it, outside maybe using LBX autocannons rather than the standards. There were more upgrades down the line with the HMH-6D, which used a similar jump jet setup with 5 improved jump jets. Where you make a change is that your autocannons are replaced with rotary AC5s, giving you a okay range and a blistering rate of fire. What they forgot though on this particular model is that the rotary autocannons burn through ammo like crazy, and they only left 2 tons of reloads on there. To make things more expensive, because I don't see any other reasons for it, they put triple strength myomer in, and you get a targeting computer to improve your accuracy on top of that C3 slave. Not a bad idea. The targeting computer in C3 is great, but the triple strength myomer is really the head scratcher here, because to have you generate enough heat to turn it on, you have to jump, shoot both autocannons at full rate and your ER medium lasers, and even there you're barely going to scratch the surface of where you need to be in order for triple strength myomer to be warm enough to give you an advantage. Truly, I think just taking that off would lower the price significantly and not impact the performance of the 6D all that much. Just to show you here, I have a production tool here. The production price for this 6D model is 10.1 million with the triple strength myomer and everything. You take it off, we recalculate the production price, and here it's production, not sale price. The sale price is usually much higher. But I mean, you drop the triple strength myomer, the price drops to 8.2 million. So it is a massive difference, which is hard to explain, basically. Because for your heat dissipation factor, in order for triple strength myomer to actually be active, you need to be around a heat level of 7 on the grade. In order for you to do that, you have to jump, shoot everything multiple times, and probably turn off some heat sinks. Honestly, not a good investment of money, space, and equipment. I would say most pilots complain vehemently about the 6D, so a 6E version was built later on. This one adds 4 tons of reloads for your rotary autocannon, so with 6 tons of Rack 5 ammo, you're going to be able to shoot them to your heart's content. You still get that useless triple strength myomer, and you get a Guardian ECM to help you protect you against the Blakist C3I systems. You also have case to protect your own ammo, so it doesn't go all up in flames if you get it in the side torso too much. Where you lose is that you don't have that targeting computer on. I do think, though, it's a decent trade. Just take off that useless triple strength myomer, and the machine will be cheaper and more effective. I would say, though, that the most common Hammerhands nowadays is still probably that 5D model, and we at Flanagan have a rebuild for it. Rather than the rarer DAV 225, we used a very common Vlar 300 engine, and make sure that the jump jets are standard rather than the fancy one. You still get a decent jump range at 120 meters, so it's a little bit less than your other Hammerhands, but you're going to get a faster ground speed. Your main guns are replaced with LBX rather than standard autocannons, and the skin is clan ferrofibrous because that's what we build here. The ER medium lasers can be either inner sphere grade or clan grade, depending on how much you're willing to put down on the bottom line. We do have a lot of very content customers with that particular machine. I was wanting to build one with rotary autocannons as well, but those don't make their way to our neck of the wood very often, so I'll have to wait until someone brings one in. I'm not a super huge fan of a lot of the rebuilds of the Hammerhands. A simple modernization of the basic design would probably have been better. They are in production, though, and you'll see plenty of 5Ds and 6Es roaming around during the Draconis Combined Davion War in the 3145s and onwards. It's easy enough to build, it's easy enough to maintain. It doesn't have any super fancy bits to it, except for that triple strength myomer, which I keep saying is useless. So it's going to be able to fit in quite a few different formations and be decent enough at what it's meant to do compared to some of the more moderns and harder to maintain machines. I mean, even with a triple strength myomer, it's probably about half the price of a fancier, let's say, Omni mech or a brand new Warhammer with all the fancy bits and bobs. So that might be a good reason for you to look into the Hammerhands. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.